We got ourselves two great defenses going at it at Kyle Field, Alabama and Texas A&M, Texas OU. How about that one? We're talking about it here on Up to the Second College Football, Season 3, Episode 6, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. And Academy Sports and Outdoors is your college football tailgate destination and official sports good and outdoor retailer of the SEC. Stop by our local Academy or visit academy.com and gear up for game day today. All right, so this week on the show, Billy and Caroline, they're talking a little LSU, of course, right? Because what has happened to LSU, that loss, and now they go to Missouri. And, of course, we're going to have a big guest, that being Greg McElroy of ESPN and the SEC Network, to get us ready for that Alabama A&M game. It's Up to the Second College Football.
Need a new grill? Academy Sports and Outdoors is the destination for your outdoor cooking needs. With our free in-store assembly and pre-assembled grills and smokers, buy online at academy.com and pick up in-store. So keep those grilling plans at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, our first guest is a national championship quarterback, also a darn good football analyst there at ESPN. Greg McElroy joining us here on Up to the Second College Football. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on, guys? How are y'all?
Doing wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's get right into it. This Bama A&M game. For a couple years, we've been talking about it meaning something, and then A&M has dropped the ball leading up to it. This year, it doesn't feel like they've dropped the ball heading into it. What do you expect to see on Saturday from the kind of game?
Well, I think it's obviously a huge game. I think the winner of this game probably wins the West, just based on what we've seen between LSU's inconsistencies, Ole Miss's inconsistencies. I don't see Mississippi State at the moment being a factor. So looking at just how these teams match up against what's left on the schedule, obviously both A&M and Bama have to play Tennessee. So that's one that I guess you could lose. Bama gets Kentucky. That's a tricky one. A&M, I think, given the way they're not really protecting Spencer Rattler, they should get their crossover game against South Carolina. So the winner of this game is going to have a 2-game edge in the SEC, essentially. A game and a half, technically, with the head-to-head being in their favor. So it'd be hard for me to envision either one of these two teams losing 2 games in the conference. So I think this, for all intents and purposes, will decide it. And I look at the matchups on both sides, and these teams match up pretty well against each other. And frankly, I hate to kind of water it down to something that seems as simple as this, but I really think, look, Max Johnson's got a little bit of a turnover issue in his career. So does Jalen Milroe, and this might be a game that could very well be decided by a turnover or two. And that might ultimately be what decides it, because I think both teams have a lot of talent, and both teams have steadily improved over the course of the last couple of weeks, to the point now where I think they're playing pretty good football.
Well, let's talk about Jalen Milroe for a second, because I feel like they finally tailored their offense to fit his skills, and he's playing at a high level, yet he hasn't taken on a defense like A&M since maybe Texas, and I don't think Texas has the same level of defense.
As A&M?
Yeah.
Whoa. All right, a little home cooking.
Well,
I like
a
it.
lot of home cooking for what I've seen in the SEC. And Greg, what they've done in the SEC has been pretty remarkable. They haven't done it all year yet.
I mean, the Miami, we can't necessarily ignore the Miami game. I mean, goodness gracious, I think they gave it 300 yards after catch in that game, or so it felt like. All joking aside, I think Texas is legit on defense, really, really good. I think A&M is, come on. I think the defensive line for A&M is as disruptive as you'll find. And obviously Shamar, the way he's playing right now, is amazing. I mean, you see 300-pounders that are on the edge that are getting home, right? I mean, that's to showcase that kind of quickness is pretty remarkable. So I do think that this will be by far the toughest test that Jalen Milroe has seen since Texas. I think both secondaries, Texas and Texas A&M, those would be the question marks. For me, I think Texas' secondary is very gettable. I think A&M's secondary at the moment, I'm just not sure. I think that's the position group that we're going to need to learn a little bit more about. But I think Milroe has progressed. They have tailored the offense a little bit to his skill set, a little more design quarterback run. He's been a little bit more decisive. Hey, if it's not there, just go get north and south. So that I think has been beneficial, but they're still giving up a lot of sacks. And with Jalen Milroe, with the quarterback, you'd think, okay, you have a guy that's crazy mobile. But sometimes that mobility can hurt you as far as sack numbers are concerned, because Jalen Milroe always believes he can make a play. You know what I mean? He always believes he can make the guy miss and potentially turn what would be a negative play that would result in an 8-yard loss into maybe a 60-yard touchdown run. I mean, he really believes that every single time he drops back, which is totally understandable. The guy makes a lot of plays throughout the game. But there are times, too, where he holds the ball probably a little too long. There are times where he probably tries to create a little bit too much as opposed to just cutting his losses. And against this group in particular, I just don't think you can take those risks. And while you don't want to take away from his playmaking ability, you have to kind of understand, all right, hey, on this play, they won. And just dirt it, throw it away, try to buy time. If someone uncovers, great. If not, throw it in the stands, what have you. So I think that's going to be a real interesting aspect of this game, is just how quickly does Jalen Milroe cut his losses, because there's going to be moments in the game, probably 6 or 7, maybe more, where A&M's defensive line just flat out wins. I mean, they're just that good. So learning to understand and learning how to play the next play, I think, is really important. Just getting to 2nd and 10 as opposed to trying to do too much. And now you're in 2nd and 18.
I'm glad you brought the Miami game, because it is part of the story this year, right? And that's, I think, the confusing part is we see what this defense has done in SEC play. And then that Miami game does stick out. What has been different in your eyes, you think? Is it just clicking potentially?
I think it's clicking a little bit. I also think it's level of competition, with all due respect to both Arkansas and Auburn. I don't think either of those two teams are near the top 25, nor should they be. Whereas I think Miami, you can make a strong case right now with how they're playing. That's a top 12, top 15 football team at the very worst. So I think level of competition has a lot to do with it. And I think, too, I look at just how Miami attacked with their own defense against Connor Wigman. I mean, Connor Wigman went through a war that day. So I think it was just one of those days where that was Miami's announcing of, hey, we're back, right? That was a big game for them. Not that dissimilar to what Texas did in Tuscaloosa. It was just a big opportunity for them to go out and say, hey, man, last year was an anomaly year under Mario Cristobal. We now are a different team. We're a different group of players. We have different skill set, a different ceiling. So it was kind of a perfect storm. But they also have really talented weapons, and they have a really good quarterback that will chop you up and will get guys opportunities because of his accuracy to run after catch. So I thought he played really well in the game, and I wouldn't anticipate that type of passing performance from Jalen Milroe. It's just not who he is. And at the moment, Bama has good weapons for sure. This will be a difficult challenge, I think, for A&M in the back end to match up with Amari Niblack, in particular, the tight end who's really come on strong. The other weapons right now, some guys have kind of appeared and disappeared as the season's gone along, whether it's Jermaine Burton or Bond or some of the other guys. It's just the 1 week it's like, all right, he's the go-to guy. And then next week he doesn't have any targets. It's been kind of odd with their distribution. But I think A&M's a lot better than what they showed against Miami. I really believe that. And maybe it's just the SEC, I'm just seeing it through SEC colored glasses, but I think you have to give credit to the opponent, but you also at the same time have to give credit to what A&M did. But then I look back at the Auburn game and there were guys running open. It's just Peyton Thorne couldn't pull the trigger for whatever reason. So I don't know. I mean, it's just right now, I think we're still a little unsure of both Alabama and A&M, but cautiously optimistic on both as well. So this will be a great indicator this week of what's to come, I think, down the road as the season progresses.
Greg, let's talk about a team that's not the same team as last year, Oklahoma. They get Texas, obviously, this weekend, Red River Shootout rivalry. And I don't know what to expect because last year was such a different game in this series. What do you expect to see this weekend?
Well, we called it last year, and it was, I've been to probably 10 or 11 Red River Shootouts, Red River games, Red River rivalries, whatever it is that we called it up to this point. Now it's the rivalry. But I've never seen, it that one-sided. We've seen some blowouts, and I think I remember watching Vince Young at his first start in the Red River game. He had one big play, and other than that, he just got destroyed. So we've seen it be one-sided in the past, but never to the extent in which it was last year. Last year was an impossible recipe. Davis Bevel, the quarterback for Oklahoma, had no chance whatsoever. Dylan Gabriel warmed up and obviously didn't play in the game, was hurt the week prior. So when your quarterback's out, it just takes the wind out of the balloon immediately. So I don't think last year was necessarily an indicator of how this year is going to go. I've already referenced that I think Texas's secondary is a bit suspect. I think they're excellent along the defensive line. I think their linebackers are really, really good. So their front seven is really good. They can go with anybody in the front seven defensively. But the secondary, the safeties in particular, I think they're great run players, but are they a liability in coverage is something that I'm still trying to figure out. And Oklahoma's going to get guys running with speed on safeties. And if they can do that, I think they can create and manufacture some big plays. I mean, Kansas torched them on one last week. Bama got them a couple times on deep balls. I think they are susceptible. The problem is you got to block them. And that will be, I think, a tough task for the Oklahoma offensive line. On the other side of the coin, Oklahoma's improved, I think, quite a bit defensively. I was talking to Cole Kulick about this today. He's not as convinced that they have taken enough strides on that side of the ball to slow down Texas. I think they have. I think they're significantly better on that side of the ball in the front seven defensively. We've seen Texas get going a little bit in the run game the last couple of weeks. Jonathan Brooks is really coming on. Obviously, against Kansas, Kansas was dealt, kind of play with one arm tied behind their back without their quarterback. So maybe not a great indicator. I don't think Jonathan Brooks is going to go for 200 plus against Oklahoma, but I'd be surprised if he doesn't flirt with 100. And then it's really ultimately going to come down to whether or not that those secondary players can kind of match up guy for guy, because they're going to get one-on-ones. And you got to hope that either Quinn Ewers gets pressured and that forces him to become inaccurate, or he misses, which not great to rely and to expect on those two things, but they're going to score some points. So I think it'll be a high-scoring affair. But I think Oklahoma will keep it real close. I mean, real close. I think this thing's going to come down to the wire.
Greg, I don't love this matchup for LSU going to Missouri, especially the way they're throwing the ball and the way LSU's having some struggles. It's an early game as well. Just how about that game? How's that going to play out?
Yeah, it's a really tough game to kind of pick. It'll be a weird atmosphere for LSU. Don't ever like when they play at 11 a.m. local. It's just odd. I remember them playing against Tennessee at 11 a.m. local last year, and it was just a complete beatdown. I don't anticipate that type of performance, obviously. I think this LSU team is too good offensively to lay an egg that looked anywhere near like it looked last year against Tennessee. But the real key is, LSU's defense is just not playing well. I mean, even some of their best players are not playing well. Mekhi Wingo is a transfer from Missouri, and he was all world the first game of the year and all throughout last year, and he's been a little up and down. Mason Smith coming back from the injury, defensive tackle, he's been a little up and down. Harold Perkins is a star. He's great, but there's only so much he can do when the defensive backs are so gettable. I mean, if you look at the plan from Ole Miss, there were some things that were new in the run game, but their passing game and the concepts that they were rolling out there, it's not like Lane Kiffin had reinvented the wheel. I mean, these were pretty simple plays. I mean, basic plays. And the secondary players just couldn't tackle. And if you can't tackle against Ole Miss's wideouts, what's Luther Burden going to do to you? I mean, he's great with run after catch and the way that they're connecting on some of the deep balls. I mean, you can't play him tight because he'll throw it over your head. You can't play him soft because he'll throw it underneath you and make you miss. So I think Missouri is a really solid football team, deservingly being ranked in the top 25 now. And another kind of like Miami a little bit against A&M. This is a huge opportunity for Missouri to prove that their 5-0 start is not a fluke. People now are pointing back to, well, if you look at Kansas State, and Kansas State had this going, Kansas State had that going, and didn't capture the nation's attention the way I think a win over LSU would capture the nation's attention. So this is a huge opportunity for Missouri, and one where LSU is going to have to pick themselves up, because it's going to be a tough spot for them, I think.
Greg, let's close out with this one. Kentucky and Georgia. Georgia has not looked like the Georgia team that we're used to seeing. Kentucky finally got it going with Ray Davis. From a Georgia perspective, that's okay. They're 5-0. I feel like they will get better. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think they're a group that will get better over time. I think they're really good on defense still. I know people will look back to the Auburn game, but I look at two of Auburn's touchdowns. They had to turn over on the 48-yard line. Auburn did some good things in the ball game, I thought. Perimeter run game is something that I think is still an area where they might need to address at some point. This is just a crazy aggressive defense. They're so aggressive and just pin their ears back and penetrate and just do so much in the front seven. Their safeties are so involved. I think if you want to beat Georgia, I think you have to throw it over their heads. I mean, that's I think how you do it is you have to commit to the run enough to get those safeties involved and then win some one-on-ones on the outside. That's the recipe. Now you got to have the guys to be able to do that. And I do think Kentucky has excellent weapons. But to assume that Ray Davis is going to go for 280 against Georgia, I just don't see it. I know Auburn ran for, I think, 218, and that was the most yards given up by a Georgia team against the run in a really long time. But Peyton Thorne accounted for 92 of those, 61 on one play. So quarterback zone read, quarterback scramble is something that I think you can maybe get them on because just how aggressive they are. But at the same time, I mean, Devin Leary is not really a runner. I mean, he can run, but it's not really who he is. It's similar to Peyton Thorne in that regard. Like Peyton Thorne can run, but no one would consider him to be a runner. So that I think will be important. I think Devin Leary's got to do a great job hitting balls downfield. Already kind of referenced that. Their wide receivers just do a great job winning one-on-ones. Already referenced that. And I think they have to do a really good job on the perimeter and making sure they don't allow yards after catch. I mean, Brock Bowers had a bunch of yards after catch last week. He's great with the ball in his hands. They like to run those little short screens and then get their big bodies in space, moving with a full head of steam. Kentucky does a great job tackling at the second and third levels. They're going to have to be their best in those areas. And then I think Georgia's run game is very human this year, which is not normal. We're not used to seeing that. I think they're very human, though. I think Edwards is a good back, and Dylan Bell has had some bright moments, obviously moving over from wide receiver. But this is going to have to be a team that beats you through the air. And Carson Beck's been really good. I saw people saying that Carson Beck, man, he's not it. He's not the answer. That's not what I saw in the Auburn game. He missed one throw, and then had another throw that was intercepted when you would think that Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint would not get beat across his face on an in-breaking route to allow the safety to intercept it. So I think Carson Beck's playing really good football right now. Been very impressed with him. So if he keeps going as he's going, then this offense, I think, will only get better as the season moves along. So I think it's obviously a tough matchup for Kentucky, but they're physical enough to hold up. And if their offensive line plays the way they played last week, they definitely have a chance down there in Athens.
Greg, I love your work, man. Thanks so much for making some time.
Absolutely, buddy. Thanks for having me.
At Academy Sports and Outdoors, bikes for the whole family are just a click away. Buy online at academy.com with our free in-store assembly. Your next set of wheels, plus helmets, pads, and water bottles will be waiting for you at our in-store pickup counter. Get to the fun faster with our in-store pickup and free assembly at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Our thanks to Greg McElroy. Now we go to Billy Liucci and Caroline Fenton. LSU's got some problems. Ole Miss, have they figured things out? Let's listen to them.
All right, welcome into Up to the Second, brought to you by our friends over at Academy. I am Caroline Fenton. He is Billy Liucci. And Billy, what a weekend for both my LSU Tigers and your Aggies. Not just this past weekend, but upcoming this weekend as well. A clunker for the LSU defense.
We have a lot to talk about today.
We do. To vent about, perhaps.
I don't know if we've had a week. Last week was like a warm-up, A&M, Auburn, LSU, Arkansas. This week felt like the first week now where we're getting like the double-double, because we got to talk A&M, Arkansas, we got to talk LSU, Ole Miss, but then we're also previewing A&M, Bama, which is one of the two biggest games in college football this weekend. And oh, by the way, LSU at Missouri, which I think is sneakily going to be one of the most entertaining football games this weekend. We'll get into that in a minute. But I think, Caroline, where we should start this week is with LSU and Ole Miss. And I'm not, you know me, I'm not picking. You're my favorite LSU. My list, it goes Caroline Fenton, Hester / T-Bob, Scott Woodward. We'll throw a hard tongue in there. Like Peter Burns. Like, I love you. Why do I say Peter Burns? He's UTSA. But I know he loves LSU. But I love you guys. But we're going to start with LSU this week, not because the Tigers lost, but because that was one of the wildest games, not just of the weekend, but it'll go down as one of the wildest games of the college football season. And at the end of the day, it's a second loss for LSU, and they're They've dropped one in SEC play that I think, looking back, they're really going to be kicking themselves because they can watch that game a million times and see a million different ways they're going to feel like they should have won that football game.
A million different ways. And, the glass half full approach is, well, you're not really that far off from where you were in the 2022 season because LSU had that horrible game at home against Tennessee. And at that point, they dropped to 4-2. So I think the way that you can look at it is, okay, well, you're 3-2 with some of the most important games left on your schedule, A&M, Alabama, and Auburn. But I look at that Tennessee game and I said, man, you had a horrible special teams performance and you just got beat by one of the top offenses in the country. Overall, It was just a bad game. And you're pretty much out from the beginning as soon as the opening kickoff got muffed. Like you were that game was out of your control. This game is so frustrating. This loss was so frustrating because there were a million different ways that LSU could have won it. And LSU wasted an elite offensive performance. I mean, Jaden Daniels threw for over 400 yards, rushed for over 200 yards, almost 650 total yards of offense, 4 touchdowns from Jaden Daniels. I mean, like 99% of the time when your quarterback has offensive stats like that, didn't throw a single interception in the game, 99% of the time, that team wins that football game.
Yeah.
But LSU gave up over 700 yards of offense to Ole Miss.
They missed record for LSU.
Tackles.
34?
Performance in 34 tackles and accounted for over 280 yards of offense for Ole Miss. So nearly half of Ole Miss's offense came from LSU missed tackles. And that's not to take anything away from Ole Miss and that their offensive performance, because that was the best offense we've seen from Ole Miss all season long. It's just frustrating how in the hands of LSU this win was, and they couldn't stop anything defensively.
I'm going to tell you what really would concern me watching LSU if I was an LSU fan, and what really bothers me. They're starting to remind me of the 2013 Texas A&M team that offensively had Mike Evans. They had 3 first-round picks on the O-line. They had a quarterback by the name of JFF, and they lost to Alabama in week 2, 49-42, and they lost like 45-41 a couple weeks later to an Auburn team that went on to play for the title. And then at the end of the year, they just kind of petered out because their expectation level was so high, and it was just kind of felt like all their hopes and dreams were kind of gone by about the end of September. Now, I get what you're saying is LSU still could replicate last year, and they can. But this was a team that had eyes on a national title coming in the season. And this is like A&M that year, they can't stop anyone. And I want to give all the credit in the world to Jackson Dart and Judkins and Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. And that was a damn party at the Grove. And that was one of those nights where you just don't want to go in there and get caught up in that. And A&M is going to have to face something similar in Oxford in a few weeks. But here's the thing about LSU right now. That same Ole Miss offense scored 1 touchdown, the week prior against Alabama. 1 touchdown in 60 minutes. That Arkansas offense that a lot of Aggies were scared about, and you know why they were scared?
Because of what they looked like against LSU.
Yeah, and KJ Jefferson, and that was without Rocket Sanders, and they went up and down the field on LSU, and that was a shootout too, 34-31, I believe. A&M plays Arkansas, and much like Bama did to A&M gave Arkansas 16 points. You go back and look, and we'll talk about it in a minute. The Arkansas offense really generated 6 points and then a garbage time touchdown when they probably should have never even got the ball back. So the fact that teams like Arkansas and Ole Miss are doing to LSU what they're doing, to the extent that they're doing it, man, that is as bad a defense as I think I would say I've ever seen at LSU, but I remember the Pelini, everybody in Baton Rouge is talking about the Pelini 2020 year.
The Pelini year was
this
dark
feels
time.
This feels It almost feels worse.
It is worse.
It's and you knew it, Caroline. You told me going into the season about that secondary and how big a concern it was. And they're not getting to the quarterback enough to compensate for that secondary.
And that's, I think, the most shocking part of it for me is I did not expect anything from the secondary. You pick up pieces, and this is no disrespect to those players that came in. But you bring in Zy Alexander from Southeastern Louisiana. No disrespect to him, but Southeastern Louisiana and LSU, different expectations.
Yep.
Andre Sam comes in from Marshall. Deuce Chestnut comes in from Syracuse. And he was a dude at Syracuse, but Marshall, Syracuse, and Southeastern Louisiana are much different than competing in the SEC West and competing at the level that you're expected to compete at LSU. So I can't nitpick the secondary, especially when you've now lost Greg Brooks. Probably, one of your best members of the secondary.
That's terrible.
Awful. And, wish nothing but the best for Greg Brooks. But the worst part about it is the defensive line is as bad as it is and is giving up as many rush yards as it is and isn't getting to the quarterback as frequently as it should. I mean, you've got 3 future first-round picks in that defensive front 7. Harold Perkins, a first-round pick.
Yep.
Mason Smith is a first-round pick. Mekhi Wingo probably is a first-round pick. You've got one of the best defensive recruits in the country in Deshaun Womack. You've got a freshman in Weeks that proved against Arkansas and against Mississippi State that he is heck of a player and is playing at a higher level than a true freshman. Well, Deshaun Womack and Whit Weeks were both on the sideline, and the rest of your defensive line couldn't record a single sack on Jackson Dart. Alabama sacked him 5 times. Tulane sacked him 4.
Yeah, Ole Miss is struggling
really
to score 30 against Tulane. They it took us like a 60-yard field goal for them to clip 30 and put that game away against Tulane. I mean, I think Ole Miss is a good team. I think they're a very good team at home. I think Jackson Dart is one of the better quarterbacks in this league. But that was like a PlayStation game. That was like Xbox. And it was the fact that Lane Kiffin was mad that they scored a touchdown with 40 seconds left because he knew LSU had way too much. It tells you what kind of game that was. But, I mean, absolutely insane.
Insane and really unacceptable. And my question now is, well, where do you go from here? Brian Kelly brought in Pete Jenkins, defensive line coach, he's been in college football for forever. He is very well-respected defensive line coach. I really don't, in all respect in the world to him, I don't know if you're Pete Jenkins away from not giving up 35+ points a game against a really good offense in Missouri this weekend. So maybe it was a wake-up game. Maybe it was a game that you needed to lose just to, expose all of the flaws that you have on the defensive coaching staff. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, look, if LSU has to score 75 points a game in order to win games, they can do it. But games are going to be really uncomfortable. And I think that the expectation level needs to be brought down a bit. You mentioned national championship expectations. Brian Kelly even told reporters, look, we're a year away from a national championship. And I don't think anybody really wanted to hear that. Nobody wanted to listen to that. Everyone wanted to look at all of the pieces that LSU was returning and what they did last year and look at how much more they could do this season. But I think we all needed to remind ourselves that there were some serious flaws on this roster, and I mean, they're exposing themselves.
Yeah.
So we'll see. They can get it together. I mean, the SEC West is an interesting place, but right now it's looking like Texas A&M might be the best team in the SEC West.
Don't you put that on me, Caroline.
Well, I'm just saying.
Don't do
it's
it.
Early.
Is early. I would entertain that discussion if A&M wins on Saturday, but for now, let's talk about the other game Saturday before we move on to A&M. We're talking about LSU, and do I think they should go beat Missouri? Sure. But when you start putting the pieces together of this one, and I'm going to ask you, how nervous are you when you look at a game and you say, the way LSU lost last week, and that it was their second loss in a year that they had the highest of aspirations. You're going on the road at 11 a.m. to play against, a Missouri offense that can score. And it's a Missouri offense with, the SEC's leading receiver in Luther Burden.
Yeah.
They've got a running back that can go. Brady Cook at quarterback. Feels like a really bad time to go play an undefeated team whose fan base hasn't had much to cheer about in a while on the road at 11 a.m. and it's a team that is offensively loaded. They're doing well because of their offense. This just feels like another shootout that LSU's going to be like, hey, flip a coin and see who has the ball last.
And that's the demoralizing thing about it. Is I looked at the schedule going into the season and I looked at that Missouri game and I thought, man, last year you got Tennessee. This year you kind of get a gimme with Missouri. Like this schedule feels a lot lighter. But obviously your schedule looks a lot different in October than it does in August.
Yeah.
And Missouri's a much different team. I mean, the conference, they've already beaten a highly ranked opponent in Kansas State earlier this year, the 15th ranked team in the country. Yeah, it came down to a 61-yard field goal, but it's a 61-yard field goal that they made.
Yeah.
And this is a Missouri team that can put up points. Now, the only thing that gives me a little bit of solace is the fact that Missouri's defense also is struggling mightily. It's a bad pass defense.
It is.
So it very much so could be another one of those. Now, I don't know if I can physically survive another 55-49 kind of shootout game, but it very much so has the makings of being a very high scoring game. I think the over-under is like 63, something around there. I'd hammer the over. It's two defenses that can't stop anything and two offenses that can score within seconds. So this is a game that you absolutely have to win. Like, this is a must-win game because I don't care what Missouri is ranked or where you're playing the game or what time the game is. LSU needs to beat Missouri, especially after dropping a game to Ole Miss. It's just a game that, you're not going to come back from a loss like that. And when we lost to Ole Miss, I thought one of two things. This could either be the greatest thing that ever happened to this team or the worst. It could be the greatest thing because it could wake them up and say, look, our preseason polls, those don't mean anything. That it could be a motivating kind of game, that it could be a let's get right kind of game, or it could be a game that just broke that team.
Yeah.
Because it already is looking like defensively, there's not a whole lot of belief or motivation or cohesion. And nothing hurts that worse than continuing to lose football games, especially games that you should have won.
I feel like LSU is playing the game A&M played against Auburn right now. I feel like we're in a situation where LSU has to win it or we go into this real concern about the season getting away from them. And they should win it, just like A&M should have beaten Auburn, and they did beat Auburn. LSU should be able to go outscore Missouri, but it's just like before that Auburn game, and when you looked up and it was 6-3 at halftime and Connor Wigman's limping off the field, you realize, okay, now you've entered the danger zone. So I think the question is who's going to be their Max Johnson, their Evan Stewart, their Edgerrin Cooper, their Amari Daniels, who's going to step up and make the plays for them to win that game that they have to win. And it'll probably be, some combination of Daniels and Neighbors and Brian Thomas, but they got to do it. They got to do it. And Caroline, I thought A&M had to do it Saturday in Dallas. I felt like that was a massive swing game in the Aggie season. And I didn't think A&M would cover. I thought they would win because it feels like no one ever covers in that game that's favored, but A&M always wins, and I thought they'd find a way.
A&M always loses that, wins that game. Always wins that game.
But I don't know that game could have gone any better if you're Texas A&M because I know it's Arkansas and Auburn, but I watched Arkansas the week earlier take LSU to the final play. I watched Auburn a week later take LSU to the final 4 minutes or Georgia to the final 4 minutes or whatever it was. A&M didn't just blow the doors off either of them, but they beat them both by more than two scores or more. And you watch that game and you realize had A&M not just made some, really gift wrap some stuff for both those teams, like what they were doing talent-wise and what they were that close to doing was running both of those teams completely out of the stadium. So the way they beat Arkansas was what's so impressive to me, because the opposite of what we were talking about, 7 sacks, 15 tackles for loss. That's 14 sacks and 30 tackles for loss for this defense the last 2 weeks. Le'Veon Moss and the running game's going. They were doing it through the air. They had a punt return with Aniyah Smith. And they did it against a team that historically gives them trouble. And they did it against arguably, you can look in Oxford, one of the 2 best QB running back tandems in the league. And so what were your thoughts watching that one and just seeing how A&M played on Saturday? And your boy Max Johnson showed up, as he typically does.
I think he needed a game like that just to remind everyone, like, hey, I got this. I got this under control. And I don't think that Arkansas necessarily has the toughest defense in the SEC, but they're not a team to scoff at. They're not a team to overlook. You overlook them, you'll lose to Arkansas. So I think that Max Johnson needed that, and I think the fan base needed a reminder of, all right, this is our guy, and even though our starter is down for the season, Max Johnson can still carry us to where we want to go. I think what I learned, and at this point in the college football season, I always like to pick up on, we're now 5 weeks in, pick up on trends and understand that the transitive property of equality doesn't always apply every single week. Just because one team looked like this one week doesn't mean they're going to look like that the next. But if you do it consistently enough, and especially over a smaller sample size of just 5 weeks, that's just who you are.
Yeah.
And Texas A&M's defense is just good, because the defense has been so good with the exception of the Miami game.
Yeah.
The defense has been so good against Auburn, against Arkansas. It has been, the defensive line might be one of the best in the SEC, if not the best in the SEC. Because I looked at what Auburn did against Texas A&M, and I'm like, Auburn stinks. I think they could lose to Vandy. I think they could lose to Mississippi State. Like, poor Auburn. They don't have a clue offensively. Peyton Thorne is not the guy. And then they turn around and give Georgia a fit. Now, again, transitive property of equality doesn't always apply, but I think that Texas A&M defensive line doing what it did 2 weeks in a row against maybe not the most, the highest amount of talent in the SEC, but still 2 solid teams that can win football games on any given Saturday, that showed me all I needed to know.
Caroline, I'll say this. They played against 2 bad offensive lines. Yeah. But that was a level of domination and destruction that I don't think any other team playing those bad offensive lines will enjoy this season. In other words, Georgia didn't record 15 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. LSU didn't record 15 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. They are that is what great. It's funny what great recruiting does, right? And A&M doesn't have it just across at every position, but they're getting it at a lot of positions. You see it at receiver with these guys. You see it on the defensive line. You're starting to see it, at along the offensive line and at running back. But that D-line is 5-star heavy. It's experience heavy. It's NFL bound heavy. And they are getting after it. And the thing is, you go, well, those aren't great offensive lines. No, my question would be, has anyone accused Bama's offensive line of being great yet?
No. Absolutely
Was
not.
I dreaming when I saw Spencer Rattler sacked 9 times by North Carolina? Did Tennessee have to rebuild their O-line this year? I know they're playing better, but still, there are going to be opportunities in these games for A&M to dominate the line of scrimmage, much like they've done these past 2 weeks. So we'll see.
I think the SEC has an offensive line problem. Maybe that's a testament to how good the D-lines are in this conference and I guess around college football. But I don't know if there's a single offensive line in the SEC that I can look at and say, man, that's a brick wall. Like
No.
Texas is the one example that I have of watching college football so far this season that I'm like, that is a good offensive line that can protect the quarterback. But
Yeah.
you're 100% right. That Texas A&M defensive line is what I expected from it last season.
Yeah.
And then last season, I had to remind myself, these are all freshmen.
Right.
And now they're a year into college football. They have a year of experience. They have a year of being in the weight room at Texas A&M. And you're starting to see the fruits of quality recruiting.
Okay, so let's dive into the fruits of quality recruiting because I said this earlier this week. This is the 12th time A&M and Bama will have played in the SEC. And I think this year, more than at any point in this 12-year rivalry, which has been a lot more competitive than people think and a lot more fun, it's 10-2. There's been about of those other, or it's 9-2, and of
it doesn't feel like 9-2.
No, it doesn't, and probably 3 of those 9 were fourth quarter games as well, including the last 2 have been decided on the final play. Probably 3 of those 9 came down in the fourth quarter as well. So now you're talking about 5 of the 11. Including the 2 A&M wins. So it's been more competitive than I think people realize. The last 2, obviously, again, decided on the final snap. But this is the year of all of them that I think is the most evenly matched talent for talent across the board that Texas A&M is with Alabama. I think from a talent perspective, this isn't, it's an evenly matched football game, and it's being played at Kyle Field. And I know Jalen Milroe's getting better and better, but A&M also has a massive experience edge at the QB position. So what are your early thoughts on this thing? Because it definitely, and Bama would probably be in an even better position if they win because they will have knocked off Ole Miss and A&M. But it feels like the winner of this one, it doesn't feel like it. The winner of this is going to certainly ascend into the pole position in the SEC West 3 or 4 weeks in.
The winner of this game has a commanding lead because you're going to look at an Ole Miss team that now has an in-division loss, an LSU team that now has an in-division loss, and then the loser of that game, obviously, with an in-division loss. You're more than likely going to have to dig yourself out of probably a 2-game hole. So the winner of that game, you're sitting pretty in the division. I think the Texas A&M does have the talent advantage in this matchup. This just is not an Alabama team that we are used to. The 4s and 5 stars, not just in your starting 22, but even below them. And then the 3rd string and then the 4th string. Oh yeah, by the way, they're 4s and 5 stars too. Yeah. Alabama just doesn't have that kind of talent and doesn't have that kind of depth this season. Yes, Alabama blew the brakes off of Mississippi State last week, but Jalen Milroe didn't do anything that was that impressive. He only threw the ball 12 times for 164 yards. He ran it for 70. Alabama does not want to win football games by throwing the football.
Yeah.
They want to win football games by dinking and dunking it, screens, running the football, and playing really good defense. Like, they want to win games by playing 2008 football.
Right.
I don't know how many games you can win in this SEC by playing that style of football. But I think that this game comes down to coaching. Because Texas A&M has the quarterback advantage. I think that Texas A&M has the pass catching advantage. I think that Texas A&M has the defensive line advantage. I also thought that about Miami. And Texas A&M did not play a very complete game.
No.
So I think it comes down to coaching. And I think that Alabama also has a similar ability that Georgia has of being able to just find ways to win football games. And I know they weren't able to find a way to beat Texas, but I think that Alabama is slowly but surely starting to figure out what they need to do in order to win football games.
Yeah.
I like Texas A&M in this game, and I think it could be as wide of a margin of possibly 2 scores.
Wow. That's a great analysis there. I don't disagree with anything you just said. I think I think one of the biggest difference too between Miami and Alabama is, Tyler Van Dyke at quarterback and Jalen Milroe. But
Yeah.
I also think that the more I watch this A&M team, and you talked about it, it's a 5-game sample size now. I believe that A&M game at Miami, and it's always dangerous going on the road early in the year for a true road game halfway across the country. But I think it had as much. I think it had as much to do with Miami having new offensive and defensive coordinators than it did maybe anything else, because it just looked in that game. And you talk to the guys enough when it becomes no longer like a, hey, here's an excuse, right in the wake of it, when you're just kind of, you get past that and you realize, I think a lot of that had to do with A&M just got hit with a lot of things that they didn't practice for in the week leading up to that game. And that's what can get you early in the season. And it might have been the same thing with Bama against Texas. I think if you look at both these teams since that week 2 loss, both of them have figured out, like you said, what they do well, how they can win football games, and they've gotten better and better. But I do think A&M's ascent is much more like, I would love to see A&M play Miami again play them again. Whereas I think if Texas and Bama played again, the result would probably be the same. And Bama was at home in that game, whereas A&M was on the road. Bama has to come on the road in this one. It's their second straight road game. This place will be nuts this weekend, Kyle Field. You've seen it. You know what it's like for a big game. 2020, A&M beat a top 5 Florida team here. 2021, they took down a top 5 Alabama team here. 2022, they took down top 5 LSU team here. I do like A&M to make it. It's crazy because I only think I've picked A&M like maybe 2 times in this 12-year series, possibly 3. And I do like the Aggies to win this football game. I think they're playing better football. I almost like this matchup. And Bama's got an incredible defense. They're still elite, but they're not like they were. But they're still – it doesn't matter what Bama's defense was 5 years ago that this one can't hold a candle to it. It matters like where do they rank in the SEC, where do they rank on A&M's schedule. This will be the best defense A&M plays all year. This defense held Jackson Dart to 1 touchdown.
Yeah.
So they're going to come in here and try to win this game the same way, 24-10 or whatever. I just think A&M looks like, when you watch football and you watch these games on Saturday, they look like the slightly better football team, barely, and they're playing at home. So I'm with you. I like A&M's chances to improve to 3-0 in the SEC and really make a statement this weekend.
I think A&M's playing at a higher level, and I think that Alabama's, and I understand that I'm saying this right after my team is coming off of, giving up 55 points and 700 yards to Ole Miss. I think Alabama's job defending Ole Miss's offense was easier than it will be against Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Because Ole Miss, they couldn't run the football.
Yeah.
And they weren't really throwing the long bombs. I all day long during that Ole Miss Alabama game, I'm thinking, you got a quarterback that can hit the home run. Why didn't you throw it downfield? So I put a little bit of that on Lane Kiffin, that he just wanted to throw short yardage kind of situations, play after play after play. And all Alabama had to do was really contain them in a short field.
Yeah.
I don't think that Texas A&M wants to do that. Texas A&M wants to run the ball. They're going to try to run the football. But if you can't run the football, we've got 4 or 5, even 6 pass catchers at Max Johnson's disposal. I think that you're going to have to spread Alabama's defense out and test them so much more than they were tested against Ole Miss. Yeah,
I think Noah Thomas and Evan Stewart, Evan with 2 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He took a hard hit there towards the end of the Arkansas game. I think he'll be fine for this one, but I think those guys vertically need to kind of get it done. Evan did that last year against Bama. Evan did it against Arkansas and Auburn. Noah and Evan both showed it in the opener. They're going to have to get some of that and really make plays down the field and do, like you said, like Ole Miss did not. So this game will be, I think it's going to be as loud as Kyle Field's ever been at a 2:30 game. I think it's a fascinating matchup. If the Aggies can pull it off, Caroline, they'll have the game of the week in college football again next weekend when they go up to Knoxville. It'd be a 5-1 A&M versus a one-loss Tennessee. It'll be a battle of ranked teams, and it'll be the Aggies looking to go into their bye week with kind of a stranglehold at that point on the West. A lot of football between now and then, but I know College Station is buzzing right now, as you can imagine. And I'm sure Columbia, Missouri is. You know where else going to have some buzz this weekend is Athens, Georgia.
100%.
Can Kentucky beat Georgia in Athens, where South Carolina a few weeks ago was up 14-3 at halftime, and where Auburn was in a tie game with the Dogs at halftime?
This is I think this is a beatable Georgia team. I believe statistically, and you can check me on this, that Georgia is the 119th ranked team in terms of first quarter efficiency or first quarter production. Out of 133, Georgia. We're talking about the number one team in the country. We're talking about the two-time reigning national champion Georgia team.
Golly.
They look horrible
in
the first quarter, in the first half. Auburn had a firm control over that football game in the first half. Same thing with South Carolina. Firm control over that game in the first half. And I don't know what Kirby Smart says to that team at halftime. But Georgia always, every single week,
a lot of neck
looks
veins.
like a completely, has to be. Yeah, whatever, performance-enhancing drug is in that speech. Like, maybe this LSU defense could use it. But I think Georgia has proven that they can always find a way to win a football game.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at this Kentucky-Georgia game. I think this is absolutely a game that Kentucky can beat. But Georgia just has better players. I mean, Ray Davis is a freak. We saw that against Florida this past week. He
really
put up, like 750 rushing yards?
Yeah.
But I think Brock Bowers might be the best player in college football.
Golly, he saved them, didn't he? Oh, my God.
Saved them big time. And, they're lucky that this isn't the BCS where you get points based of how much you blow a team out.
Yeah.
All you really need to do is beat other football teams. We saw Georgia play Missouri close last year. Missouri had no business being that close with Georgia last year.
No.
But they always find ways to win football games. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kentucky's able to run all over Georgia's defense. They go up maybe 2-3 scores in the first half, and then Georgia just makes whatever miraculous adjustments they make at halftime and are able to squeak a win out. But this, I think, will be the best team that Georgia has seen so far this season.
I'm going to go on record.
Oh?
I think Kentucky goes into Athens and beats the Dogs this weekend.
Ow.
I love their running back. I think they have a big advantage at quarterback. You got Leary versus Beck.
Definitely more experience.
Yeah. But Beck hasn't. I'm just watching him going. Probably, I'm sure Georgia would make that swap. I don't know, but there's something about Mark Stoops in Kentucky. It's kind of like they've picked off everybody. They've kind of picked off everyone. They finally got Florida a few years ago, and they've gotten Tennessee. But what they did to Florida this weekend, and that's a Florida team, and I know it's home versus road, and that matters a lot right now when you're talking about a bunch of fairly even teams.
Right.
But Florida wasn't competitive with them. And so
not even a little bit.
And I still don't think Auburn's good, and I still don't think South Carolina's that good, and they jumped out on Georgia. I think if Georgia digs themselves that hole you talked about this time, I don't think they'll be able to dig out of it. I'm going to go with Kentucky. That's my biggest upset I've picked so far this season.
I cannot go that far yet.
I know. It's hard.
I cannot. But as far as Mark Stoops is concerned, and we had this conversation last week, so maybe, I'm jinxing all of it. I said that Lane Kiffin hadn't had that marquee win yet.
Yeah.
He beat a 7-5 Tennessee team at Neyland Stadium. That was probably the biggest win of his career at Ole Miss.
He beat a number 10 A&M 2 years ago, but what I always say is that was an 8-4 A&M team at the end of the day. It wasn't the 10th best team, but
right.
LSU, he finally broke through. Absolutely.
That is going to be the win that you look at and you circle on his resume and say that was a big one.
Yeah.
Mark Stoops has been at Kentucky for how long?
10 years?
A long time. I was thinking 10-ish years.
Yeah.
What's the biggest win at Kentucky? Lamar Jackson beating Louisville a few years ago?
12 years. I think he's been there since A&M joined the SEC.
Probably so.
What's his biggest win?
They beat
probably
Lamar
the first
Jackson
time they
Louisville.
beat Florida.
Probably.
Yeah, they beat Lamar Jackson. I mean, he's got some, but nothing. I mean, he's never. I don't know that he's beaten a top 5 team. He's certainly never beaten a number 1 team. I mean, this would be a signature event for Kentucky athletics outside of, the hardwood.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, lifetime contract.
And by the way, if they won that game, they're very much in control in the SEC East. Yeah, it would be wild because Kentucky, if they pulled it off on Saturday, you would have to have Georgia, or Kentucky would have to lose twice for Georgia to make it to Athens. Likely. I mean, it would have to be like you could do a tie.
I wouldn't think would be out of the realm of possibility.
No, you're right.
Because I think that it would be so appropriate for this season in the SEC for Kentucky to hand Georgia their first loss in almost 2 years and then lose to Tennessee and who else is, South Carolina.
Yeah.
I think that would be so fitting and so appropriate. But what if we had an A&M Kentucky SEC championship game?
Oh my gosh.
Who had that on their bingo card?
What if it was A&M Kentucky? Or Ole Miss, Kentucky, or neither one of those are just that wild and crazy. Now, what if it was? You really want to go crazy here? Call it Missouri.
Oh man!
You go Missouri and
Ole Miss.
Oh my gosh, Missouri and Ole Miss. Look,
it's not that crazy. Of
CBS picked A&M Tennessee next weekend. There's a world, it's unlikely, but there's a world where Kentucky and Missouri could be college football's game of the week with 2 unbeaten teams going head to head.
I hope that's not the case.
Yeah.
Considering my team is playing Missouri this week.
Yeah, you do.
But when has that game ever not been at 11 a.m.? I mean, it's always been one of those games that it's like, all right, now you're just fighting it out for, the
we wouldn't even bring it up. Doing what we do, it wouldn't even come up. It may as well be Vandy versus, All right, Caroline, let's close it out with what we like to do. And it gets harder and harder each week. The top 3 candidates go from 3 up to 1. We'll start at number 3 this week. For SEC Player of the Year. Who's your list?
3, I'm welcoming somebody into my list.
Okay.
Is Ray Davis. That man was unstoppable.
Yeah, he was.
Unfreaking stoppable. And I get it that it was Florida, a team that every single one of us going into this season thought maybe they make a bowl game if they're lucky. But that was still a Florida team that was able to hold Tennessee to about 100 rushing yards total when they came into the swamp. Tennessee could not do anything offensively against Florida, and Ray Davis made it look easy. I mean, almost with 300 rushing yards.
And I'm with you this week. Let me start my movers and shakers outside of the list. Let me put Aniyah Smith is surging. He's had 4 touchdowns his last 2 games against Alabama. If he could duplicate that and get a couple more, he'll be on next week's list. With what he did against Arkansas, that was special, but he's coming on. But right off the list for me, because I'm with you with Ray Davis at 3, okay? Brock Bowers is coming in right after that. And I've got a lot of moving parts this week. because a couple guys that are sitting just outside my list that could move in there this weekend, there's three of them. It's Malik Neighbors for LSU. It's Brady Cook, quarterback from Missouri. And it's Luther Burden, that receiver from Missouri, leading the league. He's electric. If Missouri were to pull that upset off, you'd have to think that Cook and Burden would go off. I could see one of those two moving on the list if Mizzou were to pull it off. Now,
absolutely.
As far as the rest of my list, I'll go. My number 2 is Jackson Dart. What he did this weekend against LSU, that was a signature win, a signature moment. He's at number 2, though, but I know LSU has 2 losses and Ole Miss only has 1. But he did nothing against Alabama, whereas Jaden Daniels has been spectacular in both LSU losses, but especially Saturday night, like you talked about. So Jaden Daniels right now is still my number 1. He's having an incredible season. Dart 2 and 3 is Ray Davis. Who's your number 2, number 1?
My 2 is Brock Bowers.
Okay.
He was on my list preseason and then didn't really do anything to wow me. But against Auburn, I think that I was reminded that Brock Bowers can do what I don't think any other player in college football can do. I mean, he has the stats of a number 1 receiver, but he's got the size and the body of a number 1 tight end, and he can do it all.
Yeah, he's incredible.
I mean, he
did you see those back-to-back catches he had? One hand, ridiculous. I think one of them didn't count, but back-to-back one-handed catches, just absurd. And then wins the game the way he did. Tight ends don't do that.
No.
Much less when everyone on the field is trying to stop them and you know exactly who they want to get the ball to.
Right. And that's the thing is I think that every single defensive coordinator on Georgia's schedule says we're not going to let Brock Bowers beat us. So if Dominic Leavitt, Thomas, and Lad McConkey beat us, then fine. I'll tip my cap to you. We're not going to let the best player on the field beat us. Or yet they continue to get beat by Brock Bowers.
Or we're just going to let him catch it and be wide open running across the middle of the field to win the game. Whichever one, I guess, is your approach. Auburn just said, you know what? We're going to let this guy. I don't understand how he was that open. All right, and so your number 1 is who?
My number 1 is Jaden Daniels for the same reason, because I know that his team is 3-2.
Yeah,
I've never credited or discredited Jaden Daniels for what he did for any of those losses. Yeah. He has done nothing but help the LSU football team. If LSU was sitting here today 5-0, I think Jaden Daniels would be top 3, top 5 in the Heisman race.
Oh, yeah.
The numbers he's putting up, the things that he can do, the plays that he makes. I mean, he is one tough SOB. And Jaden Daniels just consistently week over week. And it's similar to Jackson Dart. He hasn't looked great until Saturday night against LSU. Jaden Daniels has looked spectacular every single week.
Agreed. And we're in agreement. Well, we'll have a lot to discuss again, won't we? We'll see if we can match for like the 6th straight week. We do not plan this, guys. I promise you.
Do not plan this, but we do like we kind of have a little uniform going on.
We do. I'll consult with you next week. By the way, Nuño's buying it.
So
we brought it up on air, and he believed it. And so we need to plan this accordingly.
So I was there last night, doing my duties.
Okay.
And I snuck in. I'm fully bought into the bit. I snuck into the competition team's photo.
No, you didn't.
I guess you can't really tell. But if you look
no,
at the
you
photo,
did not.
I look so out of place.
No, you don't. As far as he knows, you're in it. And we told him you're a brown belt. We didn't want to go all the way to black. We stopped at brown. So, and
but that's what I am.
For y'all listening, I did Google to make sure, because I'm like, jiu-jitsu, do they even have, what's their belt system? Because I didn't want us to be wrong.
I don't even know.
Please don't tell Nuño this. You guys can all be a part of this. We'll carry it out the whole fall. He doesn't watch this. He does the weekly interview. We patch it in to package the whole thing together. He does not watch this. So if y'all just let it go and let us have our fun, you can enjoy it along with us.
He texted me the other day and said, "How long have you been doing jujitsu?" I was like, "Oh, for years. For years. I competed all throughout high school." So
for years or 2 weeks.
All 3 weeks that I've been doing it, but
oh man.
Yeah, I'm gonna show my moves in the dojo here sometime
Yeah,
soon.
do like a setup video, fake video for him. It's gonna be.
I get some sort of AI.
We'll keep it going. It's gonna be really
awkward
awkward when he starts asking you about it in a couple weeks at Tennessee.
I need to start studying. I'll make a few flashcards of what the actual moves are.
Yeah.
Because I'm
find a competition.
Very much so a novice.
We'll Google like a competition that takes place, like some kind of national event every summer. And you'll be like, yeah, I competed in that 6 times.
I'll Photoshop my name into the finalists.
It's perfect.
Bronze medal, Caroline.
All right,
Fenton.
Caroline, take us home.
All right. That's going to do it for us today here on Up to the Second. For Billy Liucci, I'm Caroline Fenton, brought to you by our friends over at Academy. We will see y'all next week.
Thank you so much for watching Up to the Second College Football. Our thanks again to our friends at Academy Sports and Outdoors. We'll see you next week.